Hi, Founder fans. Jason here, and today's founder is the Federal Farmer, an anti-federalist author whose name we're not sure of, but today we're discussing the Federal Farmer #1. Now, this is an introduction to this series of anti-federalist papers. It's quite lengthy, but we're going to sum it up as best we can today. The Federal Farmer, in general, really focuses on the consolidation of the separate state governments into one national government. Now, of course, we call it a federal government. They called it a federal government at the time, but anti-federalists didn't really see how it was federal. It certainly looked like it would be national. Now, in this paper, he doesn't go into too much detail about that. He gives kind of a general overview and really focuses on two things: haste and suspicion. First of all, the haste. Federal Farmer asks, what's the rush here? Why are we being pushed to ratify the Constitution so quickly? This is a monumental decision. We should probably take our time and really look into things. Furthermore, at the time, most of the state governments were running pretty well. Sure, some of them had more problems than others, but they were still running. Governments were in place, and things were not necessarily falling apart. So we didn't have to rush. We really could take our time. In fact, he says that if a government is hastily created and hastily put into place, well, then they will hastily be led to, quote, alter or abolish it. By which he meant, if we create this new government so quickly, having only just created the current government a decade earlier, well, couldn't we just replace that government very quickly? And then replace that government very quickly, and pretty quickly you'll find yourself with a tyrannical government, because if governments keep getting overthrown like this, usually that doesn't end well for the people at large. Now, to answer this question as to why we were moving so quickly, he comes up with a little bit of an answer. Quote, the passions of ambitious, impatient, or disorderly men. Now, what does he mean by this? Well, it certainly seems, in reading through Federal Farmer #1, he really has strong language for certain people who have helped create this Constitution or are trying to very quickly have it in place. He really doesn't mince words. He doesn't use specific names, but he's pretty much talking about Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, who have created this new government and are very quickly trying to put it into place, and he is very suspicious of their motives. And that brings us to the second part: suspicion. Federal Farmer really seems to think that this new federal government, for lack of a better word, is a coup by a small handful of wealthy people. Specifically, he talks about Pennsylvania, people from Pennsylvania who are, and what is the quote, appointed principally those men who are esteemed aristocratical. So Pennsylvania sends a bunch of aristocrats, and there's a handful of other movers and shakers from other states, Hamilton and Madison, who've all come together secretly to create this government that will consolidate the separate states into one. He goes through a history lesson and discusses, actually just a year earlier, in September of 1786, there was the Annapolis Convention in Annapolis, Maryland, where a few people from a few states met real quick and decided to have a convention. They met so quickly that the delegates from Massachusetts had traveled all the way from Massachusetts to Maryland on horseback, and when they got there, were told, oh, we're already done. We're going to have a convention next year to solve these problems. Now, this didn't sit well with a lot of people, none the least the Federal Farmer, who essentially says, well, why did we have to adjourn that meeting so quickly when that meeting was supposed to discuss the problems and maybe present some solutions to the separate states and the Continental Congress to figure out a way to solve the problems? But no, very quickly they said, we're going to have another meeting. They had this other meeting, and they said it was just going to be changing the Articles of Confederation. Now, we've known since the very beginning the Articles of Confederation were imperfect and they need some changes. Now, but we just need a few changes for things like monetary policy and taking care of trade on the high seas. We don't need a whole new government. And the thing is, there were many delegates to the, and again, I'm speaking from the point of view of Federal Farmer, not necessarily myself, but there were many delegates who were chosen to go to the Constitutional Convention who didn't go because they thought it was just changes to the Articles of Confederation. Had they known that they would have been writing a new government. These other delegates who didn't go were probably more friendly to the common people, or the democratic sort, as the Federal Farmer puts it, as opposed to the aristocratical, who actually showed up and helped create this new government. And the Federal Farmer thinks that just these 8 or 10 people who didn't go, who were supposed to go, really could have changed the entire course of the convention and prevented this whole thing from happening. Furthermore, had the states been told what they were getting into from the very beginning, many of the states probably would not have sent any delegates at all. I mean, Rhode Island sure smelt a rat because they didn't send anyone. Patrick Henry literally said he smelt a rat and didn't go despite being elected. New York's delegates, other than Hamilton, went and said, this is not what we've been instructed to do, and left Robert Yates and John Lansing. And this is all, I'm adding a few details, but this is generally what is pointed out in Federal Farmer number 1. These are the criticisms pointing out the trail that led from the Articles of Confederation to, hey, we got a new government, ratify it right now, ratify it right now. Come on, here it is, you like it, ratify it. And this is the starting point of the Federal Farmer's 18 essays, or observations, as he called them, about the situation this young nation found itself in, and really his suspicions about many of the delegates' motives at that Constitutional Convention and after the Constitutional Convention in their rush to get it done. He wants us to take a breath, step back, maybe not just trust all of these people at their word, and really reflect on what instituting this new government would mean. And we'll pick up with that next week for Federal Farmer number 2. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you hit like and subscribe if you're new here for American Revolution 7 days a week. And I'll be back with another founder for you tomorrow.